Alright, this video is basically going to be some vocabulary around the ways that we describe matter or the physical properties of matter. A property is just a way that we describe a substance. So, here are some of the properties that are common to matter. Hardness. Hardness is a property for solids, and it's really about how difficult it is to scratch a solid. Rocks are a good thing to think about when we think about the property of hardness, and there's a scale for rocks. Some rocks are harder than others. Talc is a rock that's very soft and very easy to scratch the surface of. On the other end of the spectrum, diamond is a very, very hard rock. It's very, very hard to scratch or change its shape in any way. Viscosity. Viscosity is a property of liquids, and it's basically how easily the substance flows. Substances that resist flowing or do not flow easily are more viscous. So, for example, imagine you had a cup of water and you're stirring it, or a cup of syrup and you're stirring it. Because it's harder to stir the syrup, we say it's more viscous, or it has a higher viscosity. Similarly, imagine pouring a cup of water on a table or pouring a cup of oil on a table. You're going to see that the oil is going to flow more slowly than the water. It has a higher viscosity than the water. Ductility. Ductility, malleability, and brittleness are all related to each other. The ability for a substance to have its shape changed, to be drawn out into a wire or smashed flat into a plate, are ductility and malleability. Ductility is to be drawn into the wire. See how this didn't break off but instead stretched. And malleability is the ability to be flattened without breaking. See, this piece of gold is flattened into this nice gold coin. And brittleness is the sort of opposite of these two. This is a material that cannot change its shape, but instead breaks when you try to change its shape. So here we can see this material was ductile in that it's thinned out here when you stretched it trying to break, and this material was brittle. You see it didn't change its shape at all when it broke. Brittleness and ductility or malleability both can be useful properties in matter. For example, something like a glass or a mug for coffee, something that's brittle as opposed to malleable or ductile is useful because we don't want its shape to change easily. Alternatively, if we're going to take a mug somewhere where we might drop it, and so the brittleness might become a big problem, we might use something like aluminum mug. Steel has nice ductility and malleability, and that's important for things like bridges, so that if there's a lot of weight on the bridge, maybe it can stretch, but it won't break right away. Alternatively, something like a knife that we want to stay really, really sharp, we don't want it to have ductility or malleability. We want that sharpness to stay. And so you might change the steel that's in that knife by adding a little bit of carbon, more carbon to it, and that'll make it, it'll make it harder and a little more brittle in that it won't bend. It might break a little more easily, but it won't bend, it won't lose its sharpness. Conductivity is the ability to conduct electricity, and that's the ability for the electrons to flow around a material. Crystal shape. If a substance has a really well-defined location for all of the particles, it all follows a perfect shape, we say that it is a crystal, or it has a crystal shape. We can tell when materials are crystals because they have these really beautiful sides that are perfectly flat. We see that all the atoms in that side are lined up perfectly. So you see this material is made up of a bunch of these different sides, but the individual sides are really, really, really flat, and that's an indication that it has a crystal shape. Transparency, can you see through the substance? Opaque is the way we describe when you can't see through it all. Translucent, when you can see through a little bit, and transparent, where most of the light is getting through. And finally, luster. And that's basically how shiny an object is. So you can see there's lots of different ways to describe matter, and based on the properties of matter, we can often decide what is useful or what kind of property we want our matter to have for the different technologies or the different ways we're going to use the material. We want this tire, for example, to be very lustrous, basically because we want our car to look good. So there are some physical properties of matter.